Hello and welcome. Tim from AlphaWolfTrading.com coming at you with this week's stocks to watch for next week. That's Buddy. Just saying hello. Listen, before I begin, hopefully any of you that are out there on the East Coast in the path of this storm, I genuinely pray and hope that everything works out for you and your family. You all come through this safe and scary times. I would hate to be there, and I can't imagine what people are going through that are there right now. But if you're there, I hope the storm winds up being less damaging than anticipated. And like I said, I hope you and yours all get through this safely. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about in this video. Going to take a look at next week's economic calendar. We're going to take a look at some of the earnings that are coming up next week, and of course next week, is going to, I think a lot of what happens next week is going to be determined upon what happens with this hurricane and the damage that may or may not take place. So I think the markets will react to that. And then of course we've got another hurricane that's coming right after that one. So we've still got some uncertainty ahead. North Korea is still an uncertainty that is out there, and we know that the markets really don't like uncertainty. But I have to tell you, going through a lot of the scans for the markets themselves, there's some sectors out there that are looking pretty darn good. So we'll see how this all plays out next week. It's important that you have a plan for each and every trade, and that's what we are teaching our members over at Alpha Wolf Trading. So if you're interested, if you're struggling, come check us out. I think we have an incredibly, actually I know we have an incredibly inexpensive service that provides an awful lot. So come check us out if you're interested. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the stocks to watch for next week. We're going to start first by taking a look at what we've got coming up for the economic calendar next week. Oops, let me go with the 11th here. All right, so not a whole lot going on Monday, but I think we're going to have some good specifics of exactly what has happened from the hurricane. That could be a market mover. Then on Tuesday, we've got small business optimism, the JOLTS report, which is an interesting report to keep an eye on. PPI, petroleum status report on Wednesday, consumer price index on Thursday, jobless claims, Fed balance sheet. That's not that big of a deal there, but retail sales on Friday, Empire State Manufacturing Survey, industrial production, business inventories, and consumer sentiment. So we end out the week with a pretty significant amount of economic data. We'll see how that all plays out. But I think the big thing next week, of course, is going to be what happened with the hurricane. So we'll see how we start the week off on Monday with that. All right, so off of this week's stocks to watch list, there are several that I pulled off of. Now you can see we just don't have a whole heck of a lot going on in terms of earnings this week, but the ones in green are the ones that I am interested in for potentially either taking a trade into heading into the earnings, or looking for a trade after earnings, depending on how they fall. So let's go ahead and take a look at each one of these stocks. And then I added a couple stocks that I'm going to share with the pro members over at Alpha Wolf Trading. I have a full list for the pro members as well, full separate list of stocks to keep an eye on for trading and investing, and I'm going to share a couple of those here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with those stocks right now. And the first one is going to be this RLGT. So they report on, I believe, hold on a second here, I'll tell you exactly when they report They report Tuesday after the close. Now, the reason I like this is we have potentially a little recent double bottom here. We've got the 50-day, which is trying to stay above the 200-day, which is a rising 200-day. Now, this is a small float, only 37 million shares in the float. Recently overbought, worked off that overbought condition after this little run up into this cluster of moving averages, and it's been in consolidation mode just below the $5 holla. So a lot going on here that I like potentially. Looking at this 435 area as being an area of potential price support. And like I said, nice consolidation here right at a cluster of moving averages and this trend line. So if we get an earnings report that beats, potentially we get a break over this trend line and we take out these, or we bust above these moving averages, which would be a positive thing. Now, we've got some price resistance up there at 660. Their first place to scale, if we do take out $5 with some conviction, maybe around $5.50 or so. Likely going to have some resistance in this area, 540, 550. Now this could be a day trade or a swing trade. I would not swing trade it until after you have earnings, right? I would not hold this into earnings, because if it turns out that they miss, you could see this thing gap down and even potentially break down through this support. But I do like the technical setup on this. It's a shipping and logistics company. So, you know, one of the things that I am thinking about is, with all this destruction that is happening, I know it's a terrible thing to have to deal with, you know, at present time, but there will be a rebuilding, right? We will rebuild in Houston, and that's going to take a while. But if you think about it, that means you're going to have to order a lot of product, right? And then maybe you get more activity in shipping. Who knows? I mean, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but something to think about. I mean, right now you look at the near-term effects, but then you look at, okay, so what does that mean in the long term, though? It means we're going to have to rebuild, which means more materials, more products being shipped over here to rebuild. At least I think that is a possibility. All right, so STRM, here's another one that reports. This reports Wednesday after the close, and what kind of has me interested here is the fact that it did just break over the 200-day moving average. You've got the shorter-term moving averages sloping higher. Now, maybe we see a pullback into earnings down into this 125 area. One appears to be acting as fairly decent support on this. It is breaking over this long-term trend line, right? This has been in a downtrend for many years, right? Several years. So not a great looking chart in the long-term time frame. However, we are breaking over that chart, and we are now above the 200-day moving average. So let's see what these earnings bring us. Now, this has only got 17 million shares in the float and only traded 66,000 shares on Friday. So there's not a lot of liquidity there. This is a tough stock to take without any kind of volume, right? You want to see some volume, want to see some liquidity, and maybe the place to take this is on a pullback to $1.25, somewhere in that area. You get a pullback to $1.25, look for that to act as support. Maybe take it for a bounce. Could be a day trading opportunity if there's some volume and liquidity. If this winds up pulling back to $1, that could be an interesting spot to look at it for a bounce. So if, you know, earnings disappoint or guidance disappoints, we look for a pullback. Maybe we test $1, and that's like coming close to a double bottom bounce. And look for, and that could be a higher risk swing once earnings are past it. But like I said, because of the low volume, makes it a tough trade. But it's worth keeping an eye on, and it has had some good volume days in the past. 480,000 shares right here, pretty decent volume. So worth keeping an eye on this one. Like I said, potentially for a day trade or a swing on a pullback to support after earnings. LPTH, this has kind of got a flat top breakout look. Full disclosure, I own this. I have this in my long-term hold account. They recently did an acquisition of a company that is accretive. I think it's, they have a lot going on with autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. So a lot going on here with this company. Here are my concerns about it. It's coming up on earnings are Thursday after the close. So it is sitting right on top of the 50-day moving average. It is above a rising 200-day. However, it is overbought. And that is a little bit of a concern. This is a very thin one as well. 9.3 million shares in the float, 10.5 or almost 11% short interest. If they miss, we could easily see a pullback to $2, right? $1.90, $2.30, somewhere in that area where the 200-day moving average is. If they beat, I think then you're going to get a break over $3 and a retest of these highs up here, right around $3 and change. So I like the look of this. This I think will be the second or third quarter after the acquisition. See what kind of numbers they put out, what kind of guidance they have. But I do like this LPTH. The position I have is a small position. It is not significant. I'm really kind of looking at this as a long-term play. I do like the potential for a flat top breakout with some conviction, but I am concerned about the fact that it is overbought. But things can stay overbought for a long period of time. If they report good earnings, this thing could really fly. So worth having on the radar. LPTH, LAYN. Going back to this theory of what are we going to have to do after these hurricanes are have moved on or disappeared. We're going to have to rebuild. So then I look at companies like this LAYN, which is reporting on what day are we reporting? We are reporting, Monday after the close. Potential flat top breakout here, right? Flirting with an $11 holla. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think this is all-time highs at all. This company's been much higher. But this is a big spot to try and get through on the weekly time frame, right? $11 is a big area to try and get through. Now, it already had a nice little pop heading into earnings, so we'll see if the earnings are already priced in. Maybe we get a pullback to the $10 area, which is where we've got the 50-day moving average. We see if that holds as support. But I would have to assume that business could be getting better for these guys if we have, with all these potential building projects that are going to be around. So 15.6 million shares in the float, 22% short interest. All right, so another small float, only traded 64,000 shares on Friday. So another one fairly tough to take this trade, but it has had some nice volume days in the past, 433,000 shares, 200,000 shares. So it does get some liquidity there and enable you to potentially take a day trade, maybe a higher risk swing because of the liquidity concerns. But I think it's a sector that we probably want to keep an eye on. There are a couple of names in this space. TPC, Tudor Perini, is one that I happen to be keeping a close eye on. LAYN is another one. Even Chicago Bridge and Iron, which has been, got beaten up pretty hard, actually had a nice little run recently. It's coming back up into the 50-day moving average, which is likely going to act as resistance, trying to close that gap. But another engineering and construction name. So a lot of these names haven't looked all that great recently, but I think LAYN is worth keeping an eye on, and then maybe you look at some of these other names as potential sympathy plays if they have good earnings and report good guidance. All right, so here is a name that does not have earnings coming out next week, but it does have one heck of a beautiful chart. And this thing is moving from the lower left to the upper right. And this is Praxair, Specialty Chemicals. They do a lot of welding gases, stuff like that. And it's a thicker stock, 285 million shares in the float. Traded 807,000 shares on Friday. But this is a pretty good looking stock, and actually I just read a Seeking Alpha article on PX. This goes back to the same theory that if we're going to have to start to rebuild some things, more welding and gases are going to be needed. I think that this one could fare well in a situation like that, right? So you back out to the weekly time frame. This is a big area that it's trying to get through, 135, right? I mean, we're below that right now, but if we can take out 135 with some conviction, we are in all-time highs and blue sky territory. So pretty good looking chart on just about every time frame you look at, right? Monthly, weekly, good looking chart, worth having on your radar. More of a long-term hold. Hold on a second. Okay, so Praxair, it is overbought, right? So we are approaching overbought. Flirting with the 50-day moving average, right? Like I said, this is more of a long-term hold or swing type consideration. And if we continue to drift lower, maybe the better place to look to get this is somewhere around the 124, 125 area, right? So we've got some price. We've got potential price support in the 125 area. We've also got the 200-day and this long-term trend line or longer-term trend line that could act as support. So, you know, this may continue to consolidate and work its way down towards that 125 area. That could be a really good area to try and get involved. If it takes out 133 with some conviction, you know, maybe we're going to go back up and test that 135 or the all-time highs around what is it? Well, all-time highs were 139 almost, but let's say 137, right? Go up and test that area and see if it acts as resistance again, or if we can wind up taking that out. Pretty good looking chart there with PX. All right, let's take a look at the next one, SANW. They report on Thursday after the close. I've been watching this one actually for a pretty long time. Their CEO buying some shares at $4.11 in May. Again, maybe we have a little bit of a double bottom here, right? We are coming up to the 50-day moving average. So this does have some resistance overhead. If they report good earnings and give good guidance, then maybe we can take out that trend line. Maybe we can take out the 50-day. The first area of resistance is somewhere around $3.80 or so. You got the 100 EMA, you've got some price resistance there. You take that out, I think maybe you get a 4 test, right? And if you could take out the 4 test, $4 holler, then we get a test up into the 429 area right there at the 200-day moving average. So this one again, super thin, only 10 million shares in the float, traded 24,000 shares on Friday, but it has had these volume days in the past, right? It's had 200,000, 300,000 shares trade. This could be a potential day trade if they give a good earnings report. You know, if this were to gap up, I certainly wouldn't chase it. I would look for an intraday setup, look for some good volume, some good liquidity. It looks as though it can at times be a little bit of a pop and flopper, so you want to be careful. But just a day trading opportunity on this one if they have good earnings. AMGN. So this is one that I wanted to share with the pro members. You know, this sector is incredibly hot. Healthcare, biotech, pretty hot. Got some kind of conference going on over the weekend here. So getting some news out of bios. This is probably one of the best looking sectors out there right now. It is a little overbought, right? It's overbought, maybe a little extended. Wouldn't be shocking if we were to pause, but if, you know, some of this news that's coming out over the weekend is really positive, then maybe we see AMGN break out to all-time highs, potential flat top breakout here on AMGN. This is a big, thick stock. So, you know, look, if this were to gap up over this 183, 182.50, let's say, if it gaps up, you know, what we look for then is maybe a pullback to support, right? Come and see if what was acting as resistance acts as support. A good place to maybe consider an entry on a pullback would be down to this 175 area, where we've got some price support. So I like the look of Amgen. This is a big, thick stock, and that's why I say it's more of a swing or long-term hold, because of the fact that it's got 735 million shares in the float. It takes a lot to move it, but one thing you don't have to worry about with Amgen is liquidity, right? You got plenty of liquidity there. If it were to pull back to 174 and hold, like I said, could be an interesting place to take a starter. If it breaks below 174, then you look for down in this 165 area, potentially around the 200-day. Could be an additional a place to add. Now, I have a different approach when it comes to long-term holds. You know, I don't mind adding to a position of a strong company on a pullback to someplace like the 200-day moving average as support. So this would be one that, you know, I picked up Gilead when it was in its 60s and holding on to Gilead, and I plan on holding on to that for a while. It's been a very good trade. So same thing with Bristol Myers Squibb, right? Pick that up lower and do not have an issue with adding to a position if I think the stock for the long term eventually will be paying me the profit that I'm looking for. So AMGN, love the look of it, worth keeping an eye on for a potentially a swing or a long-term hold position. AMRK reports Tuesday after the close. Nice consolidation here right at the 200-day moving average, right? Just below the $18 holla. This has got 3 million shares in the float. It traded 7,000 shares, right? So again, a liquidity concern if you're looking to try and trade this stock. If it gets any kind of real volume, maybe you've got an opportunity for a quick scalp opportunity, but it has to have some liquidity, right? It has to have some volume, but technically it looks pretty darn good as it consolidates right here just below 18 at the 200-day moving average. It is approaching overbought, so if they miss on earnings, you may see this pull back. So, but it's worth keeping an eye on this one for a trade, only if it's got some volume. TNP, where is this one? This one is Visco's Energy Navigation. This is reporting, I believe, Friday before the open. And 55 million shares in the float. Just below the 50-day, actually just below the 50-day, the 200-day. You know, if they report earnings, it's decent earnings, we could see a break above this trend line. Maybe, you know, you see some resistance at 475 or so. That could be a spot to take some off the table if you happen to catch this thing right. If it takes out 475, takes out these moving averages, takes out this trend line, then likely you get a 5 test, maybe even go up and test somewhere around 525 or so. Again, potential day trading opportunity, and probably want to wait until after earnings before getting involved. Or if you do take this on a break, say over this little trend line heading into earnings, try to catch, you know, a little 40% move or whatever. Look to get out before earnings actually hit on Friday. So PSDV, that reports Monday after the close. Flirting with the 50-day moving average. It is overbought. You're starting to see stochastics curl down, and RSI as well. So, you know, maybe you get a double bottom pullback in this to the dollar range. That could be a spot to take it for a bounce if the dollar were to act as support. If it takes out the 50-day moving average with some volume, maybe you've got a decent day trader, likely going to have some resistance around 150, and then maybe some more resistance around 170 or so. Potential scalp op in PSDV. Want to see some volume though there as well. GSAT, they do not have earnings, but you know, the CEO picked up a significant amount of shares at $1.85 in June. This is approaching overbought. They actually had some news on, I guess, Thursday or Friday, that new product that they are coming out with, and apparently the market didn't care or didn't like the news. I don't know. Broke below the 200-day. We are piercing the lower Bollinger Band. It's a pretty big volume day. It had been consolidating for a while. You know, I'm looking for another candle. Maybe we get down to this $1.50 and we come down and we test this trend line right here. All right, $1.50, we've got a trend line, we've got some price support in that area. Maybe that holds as support. Look, you're buying at what, 30 cents better, 35 cents better than the CEO, which picked up 17 million shares at $1.85. I think it's kind of compelling. Another thick stock, plenty of volume in this one. 9.6 million shares traded Friday. On average, 1.8, 1.6, 2 million shares trading hands. I think this one is fairly interesting. Chardon came out, gave this a $2.50 upgrade target not too long ago. I think keeping an eye on this for a potential bounce trade off of $1.50 is kind of interesting. So PPHM, this one reports Monday after the close. It is at an area of potential price support. Okay, below the 200-day, below the 50-day, below the $3 holla. You know, if they miss or disappoint, maybe we see a pullback to an area of potential price support somewhere between 240 and 230. See if that holds as support for a bounce. This is a recent reverse split, only 44 million shares in the float. So if they happen to beat, or if they provide some good news, could see a nice little bounce. I mean, we've got a pretty clear area of resistance overhead. We do have a double top there, right? But let's see how this thing reacts off of earnings. Maybe there's an opportunity there to reclaim the 200-day, reclaim the 50-day, and then maybe we go back up and test that area of price resistance. I don't know that I would, I would absolutely, if this thing were to break this trend line, I would be looking to scale some at, $3.50 probably, and then maybe scale some more at just under 4, and then look for some resistance right around 425 or so. But that could be a pretty nice mover if they have something good to report after the close on Monday. And if they don't, then you're likely going to see this thing pull back and maybe go down and test, looks like all-time lows. Let's see if those are all-time lows. Let me back this out. Yeah, that would be all-time lows. I mean, after all the reverse splits that this thing has done, that would be the all-time lows. All right, so that is it. That is my list of stocks to watch for next week. Like I said, if you want a full list of stocks to watch for next week and you are struggling or looking for some assistance in building your plans and creating your trades, identifying entries and exits, that is what we focus on. So come check us out over at alphawolftrading.com. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you all next week. Be safe.